Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you to Kellen and Morgan who are passing out the source sheet for today. I want to take you through some texts related to this week's Parsha, Parshat Toldot. All right, who is Isaac? Who is Isaac? That's the small question that I set out to answer this morning. Personally, I find him to be a mysterious figure. Of the three patriarchs, he is in many ways the overlooked one. He's sandwiched between Abraham and Jacob. He's the character with the most unknowns, by far the shortest narrative, the fewest lines in the play. That's Isaac. Now, when we meet Isaac as an adult, the defining feature of his character is that he's repeating his father's story. He's the sequel without sufficient change, too tethered to the plot of the first story to go in his own direction. Like his father Abraham, he and his wife struggle with infertility. Like his father Abraham, when in a dangerous place, he pretends that his wife is his sister, a tactic to avoid harm, his own harm, at the expense of his wife. Like his father Abraham, he digs the same wells his father had dug, giving them the same names his father had given them. All right, so if we have any doubt that Isaac is being portrayed, he's being set up as a continuation of Abraham, look no further than the first time that God speaks to Isaac. Right? This is the text in the right-hand column. Okay, God appears to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land which I point out to you. Reside in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. I will assign all these lands to you and to your descendants, fulfilling the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven, and assign to your descendants all these lands, so that all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants, because Abraham obeyed my command, kept my charge, my commandments, my laws, my teachings." Now, as you can see in the text on the left-hand side of the page, with the highlighting showing you the similarities between those two texts, God's blessing to Isaac is a repetition of God's blessing to Abraham. It is quite literally an echo of the past. I will bless you. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars. All the nations shall bless themselves by your descendants. But here's the painful part. Isaac knows these words that he's supposedly hearing for the first time in the very first moment that God is addressing him. He's heard them before. Right? He heard them spoken to his father on the worst day of his life, the day his father bound him to the altar, intent on killing him. Because that text on the left-hand side of your page, that's the blessing that God gives Abraham immediately after the Akedah, immediately after the binding of Isaac. And now God, speaking to Isaac for the first time, brings him back to that fateful day. More than that, look at the rationale for the blessing. I, God, am blessing you, Isaac. Why? Look at the text. Because Avraham obeyed my command. Ekev asher shama Avraham b'koli. And if you have any doubt what those words mean, look at the last words of the blessing at the binding. Ekev asher shamata b'koli. It's the same language. I am blessing you, Isaac, because of what your father did to you on that day. Isaac is thrust back to the altar. So that's the second feature of Isaac's narrative. Not only is he trapped by Abraham's story, but he remains bound to the altar. He's bound to the binding. No matter how far he is from the mountain, he's unable to escape that moment, forever defined by this core trauma. And so it shows up everywhere in his story, and most crucially, in the fateful moment of blessing his sons. The opening verse of this scene informs us that Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see. The rabbis of the Midrash jumping on this last phrase. Why were Isaac's eyes too dim to see? Here's their explanation. Immediately, Abraham extended his hand. Okay, this is the moment of the binding. Abraham lifts the knife, ready to slay his son, bound to the altar. As he extended his hand to take the knife, Abraham's eyes were emitting tears, and the tears were falling into Isaac's eyes, presumably here, causing the dimness in Isaac's eyes. Right? The tears fell into his eyes, and his vision, Isaac's vision, is forever impacted by this moment. This whole scene of Isaac blessing his son is set up through the cloudiness of the binding. His vision is obscured by that indelible moment. Jacob comes into the room. You heard the story from Cassidy and Franklin. Jacob comes into the room pretending to be his brother Esav, fully prepared to deceive his father. We'll look at the next text, Genesis 27:18. He went to his father and said, "My father." And he said, "I'm here. Who are you, my son?" Again, we've heard these words before. A much younger Isaac is journeying with his father Abraham up the mountain, increasingly frightened by what he's perceiving. And what does he say? These are the first words attributed to Isaac in all of the Torah. Avi, my father. And he said, "I'm here, my son. Hineni bini." All right, think about this moment. When Isaac hears these words from his son, the same words that he said to his father Abraham, and his father Abraham said back to him, the time collapses. Isaac is in both places at once. He is the son calling out to his father. He is the father responding, Hineni. The binding is replaying itself. The song is on a loop. But notice two new words uttered by the elderly Isaac. Mi ata, who are you? Now, on the surface, he's asking the question to his son. Right? Unclear which of the boys stand in front of him. But in a sense, this is the fundamental question of Isaac's life. The question perpetually posed to himself that follows him everywhere he goes. Who are you? Who are you, Isaac? Are you an echo? Or are you a new sound? Are you still bound? Are you able to break free? Isaac gives Jacob the firstborn blessing, unaware of the true identity of the boy he just blessed, when Esav enters the room. When Isaac realizes what just happened, the Torah tells us, "Vayicharad Yitzchak charada gedola," and Isaac trembled very exceedingly. Listen to the Midrash on that verse. Rabbi Levi said in the name of Rabbi Chama, the son of Hanina, Isaac was terrified twice. Once when he was bound upon the altar, and again when Esau entered. There is no way of knowing which event frightened him more. But since the word exceedingly is mentioned in this verse, you may presume that this was the more terrifying experience. So why is this the more terrifying experience? Why is Isaac more terrified in the moment that he realized that he gave the blessing to Jacob that he intended to give to Esav? Why is that more terrifying than being bound to the altar, about to be killed by his father? In front of him, in this moment, stands his son, defenseless and frightened. He knows this feeling all too well. And he realizes he's yet again replaying his father's story. But now, it's his turn to sacrifice a son. His turn to impart on his son a trauma that will follow Esav his entire life. The trembling is the terror of realizing that he's going to be the perpetrator. An even greater terror than having experienced being the victim. Now, before we reach the end of the story, I need to take us back in time to a seemingly innocuous verse that, in fact, I think holds the final key to the story. Genesis 25:11, after the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac settled near Be'er Lachairoi. Now, what's strange about that verse? God blessed his son Isaac. You would expect the verse to say that Abraham blessed his son Isaac, right? We are expecting a deathbed blessing from father to son, from Abraham to Isaac in this moment, but instead the Torah tells us, strangely, that it's God who blessed Isaac. The Midrash fills in the gap. Here's the story the Midrash creates. Abraham said to God, presumably, if I bless Isaac, my son Yishmael and Keturah's sons will want to be included. If I do not bless Ishmael's sons and Keturah's sons, how can I bless Isaac? He then said, I am flesh and blood, here today, in the grave tomorrow. I've already done my part. From here on, what the Holy One wishes to do in his world, let him do it. When Abraham died, the Holy One revealed himself to Isaac and blessed him. That is what is written. It was after the death of Abraham, God blessed Isaac, his son. Right? Do you see what's happening here? Abraham cannot bring himself to bless Isaac. Not because he doesn't have a blessing for Isaac, but because he doesn't have a blessing for Yishmael. He doesn't have a blessing for the spurned son. So Abraham recuses himself from offering blessings. The man told by God, V'heye bracha, be a blessing, himself cannot bless his sons. So Isaac, in turn, is blessed by God, not by his father. But here is where the pattern breaks. Esav is desperate. He pleads with his father for a blessing. Bless me, Father. I can't. Your brother deceived me and took my blessing away. Have you not reserved anything for me? I can't. What can I still do for you? And then perhaps the most heartbreaking verse in all of the Torah. And Esav said to his father, have you but one blessing, Father? Bless me too, Father. And Esav lifted his voice and wept. And Esav lifted his voice. And Avraham lifted his eyes. Look at the parallel text. Vayisa Esav, Vayisa Avraham. Who are you, Isaac? Isaac is still bound on the mountain. He's still caught in the loop of his father's story, hearing the echoes of what was, but Esav breaks through. He lifts his voice and cries, and Isaac breaks free. Isaac breaks the pattern. Isaac will not do to Esav what Avraham did to him. Because in the very next verse, not on your page, he finds a blessing for his son. He does. It's maybe not the fullest blessing we would have hoped, but he finds a blessing for his son Esav. He's able to do for Esav what his father wasn't able to do for him. He finds words of blessing. He finds a way to tell his deeply wounded child, who he himself was, bound on the altar, I will always love you. Here is my blessing. Isaac finds a way to tell us it's possible to break the pattern. We have the capacity to break free, for the once bound to become unbound. Shabbat Shalom.